This is HOA Storytime Central. I did not raise my voice, I raised my evidence packet. You are on the record now. That is what Angela Hall shouted at me in the Towline Oaks Village Association guest lot, her handheld scanner aimed at my plates like a weapon, while she tried to make my parking orientation into a moral failure. I work as an HVAC technician in Seattle, and I am always on call, which means I come and go at strange hours and I need my car close. Angela is the social committee chair, but she acts like the parking enforcement czar, and she has decided that front-in parking is a character defect. She is standing 3 feet from my driver door, pink-faced and shaking, telling me I have violated community standards, and that she is calling management, and she is going to be dramatic about it. I tell her the parking map did not specify orientation. She says everyone got the new map in their mailbox 2 weeks ago, and that ignorance is not an excuse. I check my mail every day. I did not get a map. She waves the scanner and says she has already logged the violation, and that I have 24 hours to correct it, or the tow vendor will be notified. I ask which rule section covers orientation. She says it is in the updated handbook, and that I should have attended the community meeting. I did not get a meeting notice either. She smiles and says that is my problem, not hers. Angela pulls a portable thermal printer from her cardigan pocket and prints a violation slip on the spot. The paper is still warm when she slaps it under my wiper blade. The slip has a case number, a 24-hour deadline, and a warning that repeat violations will result in immediate towing. No fee amount. No appeal instructions. Just a threat and a timeline. She tells me I can make this a lean conversation in one email if I want to push back. Then she walks away, her ponytail swinging, the scanner and printer clutched like trophies. I stand in the lot under gray Seattle clouds and look at the slip. I have been in Towline Oaks for 8 months, and this is the 4th violation notice Angela has issued to me personally. The first 3 were for guest parking without a visible pass, parking too close to the fire lane stripe, and leaving my car in a visitor spot for more than 2 hours during a service call. Every time, the notice appeared with no warning, no conversation, just a printed slip and a smug smile. I started keeping a folder after the second one, dates, times, photos, copies of the notices. I work in systems, and I know that when someone is targeting you, documentation is the only defense. I take a photo of the slip under the wiper, then a photo of my car's position in the space, then a wide shot showing the empty lot and the lack of any posted signs about orientation. I check the timestamp on my phone. 3:22 in the afternoon, November 14th. I get in my car and drive home, which is 4 buildings over in the same complex. Towline Oaks is one of those Seattle bedroom communities where every visitor becomes an enforcement opportunity, every rule is weaponized, and the HOA operates like a small-town sheriff with no oversight. The board adopted Angela's social committee proposals 2 years ago, and since then, the neighborhood has become a minefield of violations, fees, and towing threats. My phone buzzes. A text from my friend Derek, who works in IT and lives 2 buildings down. He says he just saw Angela in the lot with the scanner and asks if I am okay. I text back that I got another notice and that I am documenting everything. He replies that he has been hearing rumors about Angela and the tow company, something about her getting a cut or a referral fee every time they come out. I ask if he has proof. He says no, but the same company shows up every time, and Angela always calls them directly instead of going through the management office. I sit in my car and think about the timeline. 4 notices in 8 months. The first 2, I paid without fighting because the amounts were under $50 and I did not want the hassle. The third one, I appealed in writing to the board, and they denied it in a form letter that said all violations are reviewed and upheld per community standards. This fourth one does not even have a fee listed yet, which means Angela is escalating. She wants me to react. She wants me to argue so she can document my non-compliance and push for a lien or a tow. I did not argue, because I already had something in my pocket she did not know about. 3 weeks ago, I was called out to an HVAC emergency at the HOA management office downtown. While I was replacing a compressor in the back server room, I noticed a filing cabinet left open. Inside were vendor contracts, including one for the tow company Angela uses. The contract had a standard rate structure, but clipped to the back was a handwritten note on HOA letterhead listing a per-tow incentive payment to the referring party. The note did not name Angela directly, but it referenced the social committee chair position and included a signature that matched the board president's initials. I took a photo of the contract and the note with my phone, then closed the cabinet and finished the job. I did not think I would need the photo this soon, but Angela just gave me a reason to use it. I text Derek and ask if he can pull metadata from some photos for me. He says yes and asks what I am planning. I tell him I am building a timeline and I need to prove Angela is working outside the official process. He agrees to help and says he will come by tonight after his shift. I spend the rest of the afternoon reviewing my folder. Every notice has a case number that follows a sequence, but 2 of them have numbers that are out of order, which suggests Angela is generating them manually instead of through the management system. I cross-reference the dates with my work schedule and realize that 3 of the 4 notices were issued on days when I was parked during normal business hours, which means Angela was actively patrolling instead of waiting for complaints. At 6 in the evening, Derek shows up with his laptop. We sit in my kitchen and go through the photos. He pulls the metadata from every image I took of the notices, my car, and the lot. The timestamps are consistent and match my phone's location data, which proves I was on site when I said I was. He also checks the metadata on the photo I took of the vendor contract. The date is 3 weeks ago, and the location tag matches the management office address. He asks if I am planning to submit this to the board. I tell him I am not sure yet, because if I reveal the contract too early, Angela will find a way to bury it or claim it is outdated. Derek suggests I wait until Angela makes her next move, then hit her with everything at once. He says the board is required to hold a hearing if a homeowner requests one, and that is the best place to deploy evidence because it is on the record and the board cannot ignore it. I agree. I just need Angela to escalate one more time so the stakes are high enough that the board has to take it seriously. I do not have to wait long. The next morning, I find a second notice on my windshield. This one is different. It claims I damaged common property and must pay immediately or be charged daily until the damage is repaired. The alleged damage is a crack in the parking lot asphalt near my rear tire. The crack is about 6 inches long and looks like it has been there for months. I take photos of the crack, the notice, my tires, and the surrounding pavement. The crack is not even in my parking space. It is in the adjacent striped buffer zone. There is no way my car caused it. The notice has a fee, $1,500. The deadline is 72 hours. I call the management office and ask to speak to the property manager. The receptionist puts me on hold for 10 minutes, then comes back and says the manager is in meetings all day and will call me back. I leave my number and a message explaining the situation. No callback. I try again the next day. Same result. On the 3rd day, I get a voicemail from the manager saying that all common property damage assessments are handled by the board and that I need to submit a written appeal within the 72-hour window or the fee will be added to my account and subject to late penalties. I write the appeal that night. 2 pages, single-spaced, with photos attached. I explain that the crack pre-existed my parking, that I have no evidence my vehicle caused any damage, and that the notice was issued without an inspection or any communication. I cite the governing documents, which state that damage assessments require a third-party evaluation and a hearing if the homeowner disputes the claim. I submit the appeal by email and certified mail. 3 days later, I get a response. 1 sentence. Your appeal has been reviewed and denied per community standards. That is when I know Angela is running her own enforcement operation, and the board is either complicit or too lazy to check her work. I text Derek and tell him I am ready to escalate. He says he will start pulling call logs if I can get Angela's phone number. I already have it. It is on the bottom of every violation notice. Derek says he cannot legally access her cell records, but he can check public records for any business filings or vendor relationships tied to her name. I tell him to do it. While Derek works on that, I start talking to neighbors. I knock on doors in my building and the 2 adjacent buildings. I ask if anyone else has gotten parking violations or damage assessments from Angela. Out of 12 units, 8 people say yes. 2 of them show me their notices. 1 is for parking in a guest spot without a guest, even though the resident was hosting a family member who had flown in that morning. The other is for leaving a car parked on the street overnight during a week when the complex was doing asphalt repairs and the lot was closed. Both notices came with immediate fees and no appeal process. Both were issued by Angela with her scanner and printer. I ask the neighbors if they will sign witness statements confirming the dates and circumstances of their violations. 6 of them agree. 2 decline because they do not want to get involved. I spend the next week collecting statements, photos, and copies of notices. I also pull my own records from the management portal, which shows that the $1,500 damage assessment was added to my account and is now accruing late fees at $50 per week. The portal has no option to dispute the charge online. The only path is to request a hearing in writing. I submit the hearing request on a Monday morning. The board is required to respond within 10 business days and schedule a hearing within 30 days. I get an auto reply confirming receipt. No follow-up. On day 9, I get an email from the board secretary saying my hearing is scheduled for December 10th at 6:30 in the evening at the clubhouse. The email includes a warning that failure to appear will result in automatic forfeiture of the appeal and collection proceedings. I reply confirming my attendance and asking for a copy of the hearing procedures. No response. Derek calls me that night and says he found something. Angela Hall filed a business registration 2 years ago for a consulting company called Hall Community Solutions. The business address is her home address in Towleen Oaks. The business description is residential compliance and vendor coordination. He also found a cross-reference in the county business database showing that Hall Community Solutions has received payments from 3 different towing companies in the Seattle area over the past 18 months. One of those companies is the same one listed in the HOA vendor contract I photographed. I ask Derek if the payments are public record. He says the amounts are not listed, but the fact that payments were made is part of the business's annual report filing. He sends me screenshots of the filings with Angela's name, the business name, and the tow company names highlighted. I add the screenshots to my folder and update my timeline. Angela has been running a side business that gets paid by tow companies while simultaneously acting as the HOA's enforcement chair. That is a conflict of interest and possibly a kickback scheme. If I can show that she issued violations to generate tow calls, I can prove she is profiting from her HOA position. The next obstacle comes fast. I get a call from the tow company directly. The voice on the line is cheerful and robotic. They say they have been authorized by the Towline Oaks Village Association to remove my vehicle due to repeat violations and non-compliance with community parking standards. I ask when the tow is scheduled. They say within 24 hours unless I can provide proof of compliance and payment of all outstanding fees. I ask who authorized the tow. They say they cannot disclose that information, but the authorization came through their standing contract with the association. I ask for a copy of the authorization. They say I need to contact the HOA directly. I hang up and immediately call the management office. This time, I get through to the property manager. I explain that the tow company just called me and that I have a hearing scheduled in 3 weeks. The manager says the board has the authority to authorize towing for health and safety violations or repeat non-compliance, and that my case qualifies because I have not paid the damage assessment. I tell her I appealed the assessment and that it is under dispute. She says the appeal was denied and that the fee is now overdue. I tell her I requested a hearing and that the hearing has not happened yet. She pauses, then says she will check with the board and call me back. She does not call back. Instead, I get an email from the board president at 9 o'clock that night. The email says the hearing is still scheduled, but the tow authorization stands because the damage assessment is past due and I am in violation of multiple parking policies. The email ends with a line that makes my blood pressure spike. Continued non-compliance may result in restricted gate access and suspension of parking privileges until all fees are paid in full. That is the HOA method Angela and the board are using. They are denying gate access, then blaming me for being late or non-compliant when I cannot get into the lot. If they restrict my gate access, I cannot park in my assigned space, which means I will have to park on the street, which is also a violation because the HOA has a street parking ban after 10 at night. It is a trap designed to generate more violations and justify the tow. I text Derek and tell him the tow company called. He says that is illegal without proper notice and that I should document everything. I forward him the email from the board president. He reads it and says the restricted gate access threat is retaliation and that I should file a complaint with the state HOA ombudsman. I look up the ombudsman process. It takes weeks and requires exhaustive documentation. I do not have weeks. The tow company says they will not wait, and they do not care about the dispute. I decide to go on offense. I drive to the clubhouse the next morning and ask to see the parking enforcement log. The board is required to keep a log of all violations and enforcement actions. The receptionist says the log is not available to residents. I cite the governing documents, which state that enforcement records are common records and must be made available upon request. She says she needs board approval to release anything. I tell her I will wait. She makes a call. 10 minutes later, Angela walks in. Angela is wearing her white cardigan and her lanyard with all her fobs and keys. She has the handheld scanner clipped to her belt and the thermal printer in her cardigan pocket. She looks at me and says, I am calling management, and I am going to be dramatic about it if I do not leave the clubhouse immediately. I stay seated. I tell her I am requesting access to the parking enforcement log as allowed under the governing documents. She says the log is confidential and subject to board review. I tell her that is not what the documents say. She pulls out her phone and starts dialing. Before she can finish, the property manager walks in from the back office. She looks tired and annoyed. She asks what the problem is. I explain that I am requesting the parking enforcement log and that Angela is refusing access. The manager looks at Angela, then back at me. She says the log is kept digitally and that I can submit a written request for a copy, I say I am submitting the request right now, verbally, as allowed under the documents. The manager sighs and says she will have to check with the board. Angela interrupts and says the board already denied my appeal and that I am wasting everyone's time. I look Angela in the eye and say I did not argue, because I already had something in my pocket she did not know about. Her face twitches. She asks what that means. I do not answer. I turn to the property manager and say I will be at the hearing on December 10th, and I will bring my own records if the board refuses to provide theirs. The manager nods and says that is my right. Angela mutters something under her breath and walks out. I leave the clubhouse and sit in my car. My hands are shaking. I have just tipped Angela off that I have evidence, but I have not revealed what it is. She is going to come at me harder now, which is exactly what I need. The more she escalates, the more she exposes herself. The escalation comes 2 days later. I get a second call from the tow company. This time the voice is less friendly. They say my vehicle has been flagged for immediate removal due to a health and safety violation. I ask what the violation is. They say the HOA reported that my car is leaking fluid and creating a hazard in the parking lot. I go outside and check. My car is not leaking anything. The pavement under my car is dry. I take photos from every angle, including close-ups of the ground and the undercarriage. I call the tow company back and tell them there is no leak. They say they are required to follow the HOA's authorization, and that if I want to dispute it, I need to contact the HOA directly. I call the management office. The property manager is not available. I leave a message. No call back. I email the board president and attach the photos showing no leak. No response. At 4 in the afternoon, I get a text from Derek. He says a tow truck just pulled into the complex and is heading toward my building. I run outside. The tow truck is a yellow flatbed with amber lights flashing. The driver is already positioning the wheel lift under my rear axle. I shout at him to stop. He ignores me. I walk up and ask who authorized the tow. He points to a clipboard on his dashboard and says he has a signed authorization from the Towline Oaks Village Association. I ask to see it. He says he is not required to show me anything, and that if I interfere, he will call the police. Angela appears from behind the truck. She has her scanner and printer, and she is smiling. She says the tow is happening because I failed to remedy the health and safety violation within the required time frame. I tell her there is no leak. She says the HOA documented the leak yesterday, and that I am lying. I pull out my phone and show her the photos I took 20 minutes ago. She glances at them and says the photos are irrelevant because the violation was already logged. I ask to see the documentation. Angela says it is in the enforcement log, which I do not have access to. I tell her I requested the log 2 days ago. She says the request was denied. I say the property manager said I could get a copy. Angela laughs and says the property manager does not make policy decisions. The board does. She pulls out her phone and starts recording. She says she is documenting my interference with an authorized tow and that I am creating a hostile environment. I step back and start recording on my own phone. I film the truck, the driver, Angela, and the pavement under my car. I narrate the scene for the camera, stating the date, time, and the fact that there is no visible leak. Angela keeps talking, saying I am in violation of multiple policies and that the tow is proceeding. The driver finishes hooking the wheel lift and starts raising my car. I ask him one more time to stop and show me the authorization. He says he already told me he does not have to show me anything. A neighbor walks by and stops to watch. It is one of the people who signed a witness statement for me. She pulls out her phone and starts filming too. Angela notices and tells her to stop. The neighbor says she is on public property and she can film whatever she wants. Angela turns red and says she is calling management and she is going to be dramatic about it. She dials her phone and walks a few feet away, still talking loudly enough for us to hear. She is telling someone on the other end that I am causing a scene and that she needs security or police assistance. The driver gets back in the truck and starts to pull forward. My car is half lifted, the rear wheels off the ground. I shout at him to stop one more time. He does not stop. The neighbor filming shouts that this is illegal and that the HOA cannot tow without proper notice. Angela walks back and tells the neighbor to mind her own business or she will get a violation too. The neighbor says, "Bring it on." Angela pulls out her scanner and aims it at the neighbor's car, which is parked 2 spaces over. The neighbor laughs and says, "Go ahead, I have been documenting you for months." That stops Angela. She lowers the scanner and looks at me, then at the neighbor. Her face is tight and furious. She asks what that means. The neighbor does not answer. She just keeps filming. The tow truck rolls forward another few feet, and my car is now fully on the lift. The driver climbs out, locks the controls, and walks back to get a signature on the clipboard. Angela signs it without reading. He hands her a carbon copy and gets back in the truck. I stand in the parking lot and watch my car roll out of the complex. The tow yard is 6 miles away, and the impound fee is $250 plus a daily storage fee. Angela stands next to the neighbor and me, her scanner still in her hand. She says the car will not be released until all HOA fees are paid in full and I provide proof of compliance with all parking policies. I ask her what proof she wants. She says a written statement acknowledging the violations and a payment plan for the outstanding $1,500 plus late fees. I do not say anything. I just look at her. She is expecting me to argue, or beg, or threaten. I do none of those things. I turn to the neighbor and thank her for filming. I ask if she can send me the video. She says yes, and asks for my email. I give it to her. Angela watches this exchange and her face goes from smug to uncertain. She says if I continue to obstruct HOA business, she will recommend that the board pursue legal action. I tell her I will see her at the hearing. Then, I walk back to my apartment. Derek texts me 10 minutes later asking if I am okay. I tell him they towed my car and that Angela signed the authorization herself. He says that is a conflict of interest and possibly fraud if she is getting paid by the tow company. I agree. I tell him I need to get my car back before the hearing, because if I do not, Angela will use the impound as proof that I am non-compliant. He says he will drive me to the tow yard tomorrow morning. That night, I sit in my apartment and go through the entire file. I have 19 photos of violation notices, 6 signed witness statements, metadata from Derek proving the timeline, screenshots of Angela's business filings showing payments from tow companies, a photo of the vendor contract with the kickback note, and now 2 videos of the tow itself showing Angela Signy, NG the authorization, and admitting on camera that the car will not be released until I pay the fees. I also have the original violation notices showing inconsistent case numbers and dates that do not match the management system logs. If you want to see how this showdown ends, hit that subscribe button now because the hearing is about to get real. I spend the next morning at the tow yard. The lot is a fenced gravel field with rows of cars in various states of disrepair. My car is near the back, still on the flatbed. I walk into the office and ask to pay the impound fee. The clerk says the fee is $250 plus 1 day of storage at $40, total $290. I ask if the HOA has to authorize the release. The clerk says no. Once I pay the fee, the car is mine. I pay with a credit card and get a receipt. The clerk gives me a release form and tells me to take it to the yard supervisor. The yard supervisor is a guy in his 50s with a clipboard and a radio. He looks at the release form and nods. He radios the driver, and 5 minutes later my car is back on the ground. I get in and start it. Everything works. I drive out of the lot and head back to Towline Oaks. On the way, I stop at a FedEx office and make 3 copies of my entire file. 1 for me, 1 for Derek, and 1 for the hearing. I also print a summary timeline on a single page with every violation, every notice, every deadline, and every piece of evidence cross-referenced by date. When I get back to the complex, I park in my assigned space, front in, and take a photo. I send the photo to Derek and the neighbor who filmed the tow. I text them both saying I have my car back and the hearing is in 12 days. Derek replies that he has finished the metadata analysis and that he can testify if needed. The neighbor replies that she will be at the hearing as a witness and that 3 other neighbors want to come too. The next week is quiet. No new notices, no calls from the tow company, no emails from the board. I use the time to rehearse my presentation and organize my evidence into a binder with tabs for each category. Violation notices. Witness statements. Photos. Metadata reports. Business filings. Vendor contract. Videos. I also draft a written statement summarizing the conflict of interest and requesting that the board remove Angela from any enforcement role pending an independent audit of her business relationships with vendors. On December 9th, the day before the hearing, I get an email from the board secretary. The email says the hearing will be held in the clubhouse community room and that I am allowed up to 15 minutes to present my case. The board will then deliberate and issue a decision in writing within 10 business days. The email also says that recording devices are not permitted in the hearing. I reply asking if that ban applies to the board as well. No response. Derek comes over that night, and we go through the binder one more time. He asks if I am nervous. I tell him I am not nervous. I am ready. He says Angela is going to try to control the narrative and that the board will probably side with her unless I make it impossible for them to ignore the evidence. I tell him that is exactly the plan. I am going to slide a tabbed timeline to the board and the room at the same time, and I am going to submit the vendor contract photo as a formal exhibit at the hearing and watch Angela's face change. The hearing is at 6:30. I arrive at 6:15 with Derek and the neighbor who filmed the tow. 2 other neighbors are already waiting in the lobby. The board secretary checks us in and says the hearing will start on time. At 6:30, the board president calls the meeting to order. There are 5 board members sitting at a long table at the front of the room. Angela is sitting in the front row of the audience section, her scanner and printer on the chair next to her. The board president reads the case number and says this is a hearing regarding my appeal of a common property damage assessment and multiple parking violations. He asks if I am ready to present. I say yes. I stand up and walk to the front of the room. I hand a copy of my binder to the board president and a copy to the board secretary. I keep one for myself. I also hand out single-page timeline summaries to everyone in the room, including Angela. I start by summarizing the 4 violation notices I received over 8 months. I show the dates, the case numbers, and the fact that 2 of the numbers are out of sequence. I explain that this suggests the notices were generated outside the official management system. One of the board members interrupts and says the case numbers are assigned automatically by the software. I say that is correct, which is why the out-of-sequence numbers indicate manual entry or bypassing the system. The board member frowns and flips through the binder. I move to the damage assessment. I show the photos of the asphalt crack and explain that the crack is not in my parking space and there is no evidence my car caused it. I show the timeline proving I requested an appeal within the deadline and that the appeal was denied with a one-sentence response. I show the email from the board president authorizing the tow despite the pending hearing. I explain that the tow was executed by a vendor with a financial relationship to Angela Hall, and I submit the business filings showing payments from the tow company to her consulting business. Angela stands up and says this is defamatory and that I am making false accusations. The board president tells her to sit down. She stays standing. She says her business is separate from her HOA role and that she has never received money for individual tow calls. I do not argue. I just turn to the next tab in the binder and pull out the photo of the vendor contract with the handwritten kickback note. I submit it as a formal exhibit at the hearing and watch Angela's face change. The room goes silent. The board president takes the photo and studies it. He asks where I got it. I explain that I photographed it during a service call at the management office 3 weeks ago and that the metadata confirms the date and location. Angela says the photo is inadmissible because I accessed a restricted area without permission. I say I was authorized to be in the office for an HVAC repair and the filing cabinet was left open. The board president asks if anyone on the board was aware of this incentive payment arrangement. No one answers. I continue. I show the videos from the tow, including Angela signing the authorization and stating on camera that my car would not be released until I paid the disputed fees. I show the witness statements from 6 neighbors describing similar enforcement patterns. I show Derek's metadata analysis proving that my photos were taken when and where I said they were. I show the timeline proving that Angela's enforcement activity correlates with her business activity. Then I slide a tabbed timeline to the board and the room at the same time. The timeline has 3 columns. Date. Action. Evidence reference. Every row is color-coded. Violations in red, appeals in blue, vendor activity in yellow, financial records in green. The board president looks at the timeline for a long time. He asks Angela if she wants to respond. She does not stand up. She just sits there, pale and silent. One of the other board members asks if Angela's consulting business has received any other payments from HOA vendors. Angela does not answer. The board member repeats the question. Angela says she is not required to disclose her business income to the board. The board member says if the business is related to her HOA duties, she is absolutely required to disclose it under the conflict of interest policy. Angela stands up and says she is calling management and she is going to be dramatic about it. She pulls out her phone and starts to dial. The board president tells her to sit down and put the phone away. Angela does not sit. She says this hearing is a witch hunt and that I am the one who violated parking rules and damaged common property. I say I have already proven there was no damage and that the parking rules were selectively enforced. Angela says I am lying. I say I have 19 photos, 6 witness statements, and 2 videos that say otherwise. She says the witnesses are biased. I ask how they are biased. She says they are my friends. I say I did not know half of them before this conflict started. The board president cuts in. He says the board will deliberate and issue a written decision within 10 business days. He asks if I have anything else to add. I say yes. I request that the board remove Angela from any enforcement role pending an independent audit of her business relationships with vendors. and I request that the board adopt a policy requiring all enforcement actions to be logged in the official management system with timestamps and documentation. I also request that my damage assessment be voided, all late fees be waived, and the tow costs be reimbursed. Angela jumps up and shouts that I cannot dictate policy to the board. The board president tells her to leave the room. She refuses. He says if she does not leave, he will call security. She grabs her scanner and printer and storms out. The door slams behind her. The room is dead quiet. The board president looks at me and says the board will review all the evidence and issue a decision. He thanks me for my time and adjourns the meeting. Derek and the neighbors walk out with me. We stand in the parking lot under the yellow security lights. The neighbor who filmed the tow says that was the most satisfying thing she has seen in years. Another neighbor says Angela looked like she was about to pass out when I showed the vendor contract. Derek says the board has no choice now but to act, because if they do nothing, I can take the evidence to the state ombudsman or file a lawsuit. I go home and wait. 5 days later, I get an email from the board president. The email is 3 pages long. It says the board has completed its review and found that the damage assessment was issued in error and is hereby voided. All late fees are waived. The tow was not properly authorized, and the HOA will reimburse me for the impound and storage costs. The board has also determined that there is a potential conflict of interest regarding vendor relationships and enforcement activity. Effective immediately, Angela Hall is removed from her role as Social Committee Chair and is prohibited from issuing violation notices or contacting homeowners outside of official HOA meetings. The email continues. The board has adopted a new enforcement policy requiring all violations to be logged in the management system with photo documentation and a 48-hour notice period before any fines or towing actions. The board is also commissioning an independent audit of all vendor contracts and payments to ensure compliance with fiduciary duties. Finally, the board is issuing a formal censure of Angela Hall for conduct unbecoming of a board member and for failure to disclose a business relationship that created a conflict of interest. I forward the email to Derek and the neighbors. Derek calls me and says congratulations. He asks what I am going to do now. I tell him I am going to keep my car parked front in and wait for the board to follow through. He laughs and says he will keep an eye on the vendor audit. I say thanks, and I mean it. Without Derek's help pulling metadata and business records, I would not have had half the evidence I needed. The next week, I see Angela in the parking lot. She is walking to her car with a box of HOA materials. No scanner, no printer, no lanyard. She sees me and stops. For a second, I think she is going to say something, but she just turns and gets in her car. As she pulls out, I notice her handheld scanner slips from her hand and skitters across the pavement. She does not stop to pick it up, she just drives away. I walk over and look at the scanner. The screen is cracked and the battery cover is missing. I leave it on the curb. 2 months later, the board releases the vendor audit report. The report confirms that Angela's consulting business received over $12,000 in referral payments from 3 different towing and vehicle boot companies over 18 months. The report also finds that Angela issued violation notices at a rate 3 times higher than the previous enforcement chair, and that over 60% of those notices were disputed or overturned by the management office after homeowners appealed. The board votes to terminate all vendor contracts that include referral fees or incentive payments, and to require competitive bidding for any future contracts. The board also adopts an enforcement checklist that limits Karen tactics like surprise notices, verbal-only warnings, and same-day towing authorizations. Every violation now requires a photo, a 48-hour cure period, and a written explanation of the specific rule being violated. The checklist is posted in the clubhouse and on the HOA website. Neighbors start calling it the Angela Rule. I run into the neighbor who filmed the tow at the mailboxes one afternoon. She says she heard Angela moved out of Towline Oaks and bought a condo in Tacoma. I say I heard the same thing. She asks if I feel bad about what happened. I tell her no. I say Angela built a system to profit off her neighbors, and when someone finally called her on it, the system collapsed. That is not my fault. That is hers. The parking lot is quieter now. No more surprise violation notices. No more tow trucks showing up in the middle of the day. The new enforcement chair is a retired accountant who logs everything and sends reminders a week before issuing fines. People actually comply because the rules are clear and the process is fair. It turns out that when you treat homeowners like adults instead of criminals, they respond better. I still keep my file, all 19 photos, all 6 witness statements, all the metadata, all the videos. I keep it in a binder on my shelf, just in case. Derek says I should write a guide for other homeowners dealing with HOA enforcement abuse. I tell him maybe someday. For now, I am just glad I can park my car without checking over my shoulder for Angela and her scanner. The damage assessment that started this whole mess is gone from my account. The late fees are gone. The tow costs were reimbursed in full. My record is clean. Angela's timeline is proven false with timestamps, and the board adopts an enforcement checklist that limits Karen tactics. The system worked, eventually, but only because I kept receipts and refused to let Angela bully me into paying for damage I did not cause. I think about the moment in the hearing when I submitted the vendor contract as a formal exhibit and watched Angela's face change. That was the turning point. Everything before that was building the case. Everything after that was watching it fall into place. Angela thought she could intimidate me into silence by threatening liens and towing and gate access. She did not count on me documenting every move, every notice, every contradiction. She especially did not count on me finding the vendor contract that proved she was getting paid to enforce rules she was making up as she went. The HOA name Towline Oaks Village Association is different now. The board is more careful. The vendors are more transparent. The enforcement process is actually documented and reviewable. It is not perfect, but it is better. And I played a part in making it better by refusing to back down and by bringing a documented appeal that overturned the decision on the record. I see my neighbors more often now. We talk in the parking lot and at the mailboxes. A few of them have thanked me for standing up to Angela. One of them brought me a bottle of wine and said she wished she had fought back when Angela hit her with a bogus guest parking violation. I told her it is never too late to file a complaint if she still has the paperwork. She said she threw it away, but next time, she will keep everything. That is the lesson. Keep everything. Every notice. Every email. Every photo. Every receipt. Because when someone in power decides to target you, the only defense is proof. Angela had power and a system that protected her, but I had receipts. And in the end, receipts beat power every single time. Glad you could make it to the end.